Lozano, and I'm the founder and managing editor at Waterbury Press. Thank you so much for tuning in, and welcome to another virtual meet and greet. This afternoon, we get to welcome literary lady Dr. Patricia Daly-Lipe. She is the author of La Jolla, A Celebration of Its Past. This is a history lesson and photo album of this gem of a town in Southern California, San Diego County, which you can order at Waterbury Press and have her sign it for you. She has authored 10 other titles, all of them in different genres. Patricia is a past president of the National League of American Pen Women, La Jolla branch, and later she became president of the Washington, D.C. branch. I've been looking so forward to this opportunity to hear directly from Patricia about all her impressive achievements, her spirit of adventure, and the love of the arts that has taken her from coast to coast over the years. So let's welcome her now and start this conversation right quick. Give me a second because she's in the waiting room. So I will bring her back in now. Let's see. Okay. Hello, hello.
Hello.
There you are. Thank you so much. First of all, thank you so much for sharing La Jolla, A Celebration of Its Past with us. Thank you for agreeing to do this interview, and thank you for supporting our efforts at Waterbury Press, where every day is book signing day. And just a quick reminder again, that you can order this historic gem, La Jolla, A Celebration of Its Past at Waterbury Press, and have Patricia sign it for you. I'm excited to hear about your adventures in the literary world and art. And I was thinking that we would begin with you telling us a little bit about your La Jolla book and how it came about.
Thank you. Well, it's my honor to be on and to be able to talk to you via the Zoom. The La Jolla book came about because I was opening up the La Jolla Historical Society, their office on a Saturday. And the office I was using was in a building that when I was a little kid was second grade for Bomber School. Oh. So that's where I went to Bomber School in second grade. And there it is. It's now the offices on the side street of La Jolla Historical Society. At least it was then. And this was when the country was celebrating the millennium, 1999. We're getting ready for the big 2000. And I got a call from Ann Terhune from Jolla Village News, Beach and Bay Press. And she said, we would like you to write on a weekly basis the history of La Jolla to go in La Jolla Village News. And it would go in every Friday. Well, it's like being back at college. You know, you have to have a final draft and everything done every week. So I accepted. And then I thought, well, you know, I need some help with this. So I went to my friend Barbara Dawson, and here's a picture of Barbara.
Oh my goodness.
She's with Cliff Robertson and my mother-in-law, Georgetowner Lipe.
Okay.
Georgetowner Lipe, my mother-in-law, was like the living legend of La Jolla, but that's another story. But Barbara Dawson and Cliff Robertson, but all of them sadly are no longer with us. But Barbara Dawson was the first president of the La Jolla Historical Society. And Barbara was like a surrogate mother to me. And she had been in La Jolla for a lot longer than I had, and had stories about what it used to be like, and marvelous stories that we incorporated into these weekly series. Mm-hmm. So when I finally put it all together, I handed it over to Beach and Bay Press. No, I didn't. I was called by Sunbelt Publications, and I was asked to make a book out of these weekly articles. Well, we had been doing these articles for 2 years, so you can imagine how many stories I had. Oh, so we put it all together, and my husband integrated the photographs into the text. Steele's really good at that. And we handed this huge package to Sunbelt Publication when they asked us to write the book. And they said, no, that's much too big. Can't do it. So it took us a few months to get it limited and down to the size they wanted, and then they published it. Well, the problem was I signed a contract with them. This is a learning process for anybody out there who wants to be an author. I had not had the contract looked at by an attorney. I learned my lesson because the book sold for $19.95, and what do you think I got?
Oh my God, I don't even want to guess.
$1.12.
Ugh,
We did all that work and I got $1.12. So I learned my lesson. Anyway, the book was selling really well at first, and then they kind of got bored promoting it. And as the years went by, they finally said, look, why don't you come and buy the rest of them and we'll give them to you for a little less than $19.95. And I said, there's no way I'm going to pay that. So we bought everything, all the books that they had left. So I have all of them here stored at this house in Florida. And I am delighted that you're working with me and you will sell the books for me. So,
well, I tell you what, that La Jolla is a favorite destination. I mean, that really is a gem of a town. And I think, I mean, I speak Spanish, and
no se puede continuar en español.
Muy bien. Joya es en español, but I think that it's misspelled because I've usually seen it spelled Joya, and that means jewel or gem, right?
But that is not how it came about. And I have all the history of really how the name came about in the book. So instead of telling everybody, I guess they'll have to buy the book, right?
Well, and I mean, I have my copy. I don't know if you can see it back here.
Yes, I can see.
Right there. And I mean, just the feel of it, the history of it. I mean, it's just amazing to me. Just going through the pictures, how there was nothing there, and now I mean, you know, it's like all these houses are crammed together, and you know, in this beautiful town. And anyway,
well, just picture being in a ship back in the day and not knowing how to find. They're looking for the supposed jewels, if you want to use that word, that were hidden in the caves. You know, the caves of La Jolla.
right.
And they were looking for the caves and in the boat. And the way they found them was to look up and see the Torrey pine tree, because that's the only place on the continent that you'll have a Torrey pine tree. As soon as they saw the Torrey pine tree, they knew that they were where the caves were. And that's how they went and looked. They never found the quote jewels, but who knows? There may be something hidden away.
Well, and I mean, who knows? Because I mean, all of Southern California, I mean, quite far up the coast, really. I mean, it used to be Indians, right? Like the
well, if you go out from La Jolla Shores, and you have your snorkel and you can, you know, swim at that, the deepest and one of the biggest public parks in the United States is actually underwater off of La Jolla.
Oh
but all the way out to where that canyon is, which is like a public park, if you will, all the way out to that canyon, it used to be where people lived. So you can find artifacts from the Indian population that lived further out, which is now underwater. The water rose and came closer. Now, you know, it's going to rise even some more with the global warming, but way back in the day, right to the edge of that underwater canyon is where the land actually originally went.
Well, I mean, the value of that content is of the content of this book is it's history. And I mean, well, yeah. So I'm so excited that you're sharing this book with us, and I hope that people will take advantage of this opportunity to get a copy of it signed by you and learn a little bit about this fabulous locale in Southern California. I mean, yeah, La Jolla, like I said, is a favorite destination of mine and my husband's when we head south. I mean, we're now living in the North Bay area, so yeah. But so one of the things that I think it's really interesting about you is that you have a very impressive catalog of books, and that they're all in different genres. And I think that that's
Yes.
wonderful, because I'm a person of limited. I mean, I write my philosophical fictions and supernatural escapes, and I'm kind of, you know, in that category, and I try not to deviate from that. But tell us a little bit about your other books, and the genres that you have.
Well, let me tell you how it all began. When I was at the Bishop's School in La Jolla in 7th grade, there was a newspaper called Sahatica, which is sees all, hears all, thinks it knows all. Sahatica. And I wrote for Sahatica, and I loved writing. And I thought, this is the direction I'm going to take. In every school I went, including Vassar College, I wrote for the literary magazine or the newspaper. Then I went to live in Europe, and I was living there for a few years. I got a degree from the Université Catholique de Louvain in Belgium. And then I went to live in Rome later. And then I came back to the United States, and my first job was in Washington, D.C., writing for the Evening Star newspaper. Now, where they put me was to answer the telephone, and you had a reporter who was out, with some catastrophe taking place, and he would be speaking very quickly. Well, keep in mind, I had been speaking French and Italian for 2.5 years, not English. And so even though English is my first language, my ear wasn't adjusted for their speed of their speech, plus the fact that most of them were Southerners and they had Southern accents.
Yeah.
So I kept saying to them, can you repeat that? Well, if you have a disaster behind you, you don't want to repeat it. So they put me in a different category. Where did you think they put me at the newspaper?
Oh my gosh. I won't hazard a guess.
Obituaries.
Oh.
My first job in the United States was writing obituaries.
Oh my goodness.
But it was fascinating. I met some interesting people, and I was happy to write about their deceased loved one. And I got to know them, and I love people. I love talking to people. And it drives my husband nuts, because if we're in line at the grocery store, I have to get the life history of everybody around me, So, but that was my first job in the United States. And then I came back to California and was writing for the newspaper, and that's how we got that wonderful book you have behind you. And from there, it was Richard Lederer, who I guess you know who he is, A Way with Words. Well, he came to me and he said, Patricia, you taught a class in Annapolis that I've heard about called Myth, Magic, and Metaphor. And I said, yes. And he said, you need to make a book out of that class. There it is. And that's thanks to Richard Lederer.
Press soon.
Yes. So that book came as a result of his saying, that was my second book. And I wrote it because he encouraged me to do it, which I really appreciated. And I just won the New York Book Award last week for that book.
Oh my gosh, congratulations. So well deserved.
Thank you.
Yes, I mean, I think that this is it's a must-have handbook for any creative writer out there.
Well,
I mean,
it's meant to inspire the reader to be a writer or a musician or an artist. It's meant to inspire that creative muse who lurks within us all to express his or herself. And the painting on the cover is, which you showed a minute ago. That's one of my paintings.
So you also paint?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. And
I'm doing illustrations for a children's book that a lady asked me. She said, I saw some of your drawings, and she said, I'm writing a children's book. Can you do the drawings can you illustrate it? And I said, well, yeah. So my new job is to be an illustrator for her book.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And so now tell me how many instruments you play.
No. No, can't do that. I can't sing either, but
painting and
I think I can, but my husband doesn't think so.
So then you've done biographies, you've done historical. I mean, what about historical fictions or?
Yes, the historical fiction. The first book was the story of my mother's life in Paris between World War I and World War II. And because I speak French, I interviewed people in Paris who may have known her and knew certain parts of the history that I was researching. She died when I was 18.
Oh,
I graduated from Bishop School and I went back to the East Coast. My mother was in the East Coast. She's a native Washingtonian, although she was born in Canada. And I was going to Vassar College. And then after my freshman year, I took the summer to be back home with my mother. And I went and took summer classes at Georgetown University, which was all boys in those days. So girls could only study there in the summer.
oh boy.
And then in August, she just became, I had to keep the secret. I found out in La Jolla that she had cancer and I was not allowed to tell her. So I had to keep this secret for 2.5 years.
Oh,
And she got worse and worse, and we had nurses staying at the house with her. And finally, it got to the point where I had to drive her to Georgetown Hospital, and which was very near where we lived. And then I went back to class the next day, and when I came home, the telephone was ringing, and the people who became my guardians said they were at the hospital and she had passed away.
oh my God.
So I took a semester off from Vassar and then went back the following semester, but I was only 18 years old.
Oh my goodness.
And so I didn't know what her life was like before I was born. And so I researched it and found out about when she lived in Paris between the wars. And it was fascinating to study. Paris was the cultural capital of the world in those days. You had everything going on with all these great writers and artists, you know. And actually, James Joyce lived in the apartment above hers on the Ile Saint Louis. So I have him speaking with his own words, you know, to make him come alive in the book. But the research was, it took me several years to write that book because I had so much research to do. And the fiction part is my mother's not around to tell me if I got it right. So wherever I had to guess, I incorporated what I think was her situation at that point. But the facts are there. So it's historical fiction. The history is real. All the people in the book are real. What they say is direct quotations from what E.E. Cummings, James Joyce, Gertrude Stein, all of those are there in their own words. And then Lindbergh arrived at Le Bourget Airport. And so I had her going to the airport, which I know she did. And I have talked to his grandson. And so I got those facts correct about his landing, how he went around the Eiffel Tower. Where's the airport? Where's the airport? You know, and finally the big bright lights were showing up in the distance in Le Bourget Airport. And he finally made his way over there and landed. I have all of that information in that book. So that's A Cruel Calm, Paris Between the Wars. And A Cruel Calm is from a poem that was written by James Joyce.
Excellent.
So that's where I got the title for that one. So
now, what is that other book that was an award?
Patriot Priest.
Yes.
Patriot Priest is the story of my great uncle William. Now, when I went to live in Rome, after studying in Belgium, I went to Paris, and then from Paris, I went to live in Rome to meet my great uncle because he was the only living relative on my mother's side. And he was the only American canon of St. Peter's in Rome. He didn't tell me anything about his life before. So after he passed away, I researched and found out he served the troops in World War I. And he came back to the United States and was decorated as the Patriot Priest of Picardy. He served the troops in the front lines at Picardy, the Battle of Picardy during World War I. And then he went, after the World War I, came back to Paris because he spoke 5 languages. He grew up in Europe because his father was the consul general to Geneva. So all of the children, my grandmother and her brothers, were all raised in Europe. So he spoke 5 languages. So he went back to Paris to be there to help people overcome all the pain that they'd been subjected to during World War I. And he was there between the wars. And then he moved down when he was asked to be canon of Santa Maria Maggiore. And then from Santa Maria Maggiore, he became the canon of the Vatican, of St. Peter's.
Wow.
So I wrote about his life in that book, and that book won an award also, yes.
Well,
But it was very interesting to find out because he never told. He was a very jovial man. You know, he was friends with everybody. I had lunch with the King and Queen of Denmark at his apartment, and yet he was equally jovial with the little kid on the street who needed some extra food. I mean, all walks of life loved my great uncle.
Remarkable.
Yeah.
Remarkable. Oh my goodness. Well, so I'm thinking that it's very clearly that your love of writing, your love of research has been a driving force throughout your whole life. And I mean, so for a living, is it the teaching or has it been the writing or how?
Well, I love teaching. That the class Myth, Magic, and Metaphor was a class I conducted at the Art Center, the Center for the Arts, excuse me. It's called the Center for the Arts in Annapolis. I went there to paint. And then I said, you have everything here. You have drama, you have music, you have painting, you have sculpture, but you don't have creative writing. And they said, well, you teach it. So I did. I started the class, Myth, Magic, and Metaphor. And some of my, quote, students were actually professors from the Naval Academy. And the first thing I say is there are no rules.
Yeah.
The Naval Academy, no rules. What? But they stuck with me. One of the professors actually signed up for 3 of my classes.
Excellent. I mean, yeah.
But I really enjoy the writing because I love doing the research. I love the personal perspective of history. And I'm a philosophy major. I have a PhD in creative art and communication. Mm-hmm. And it's because my undergraduate was in philosophy. I don't want to know who, what, when, and where. I want to know why. Why? And the why comes from the personal perspective. So my books, from one angle or another, are basically personal perspective. Even my horses wrote a book, and I had to tell their perspective.
So up until recently, you were living in La Jolla or in San Diego County.
Yeah, Rancho Santa Fe.
Rancho Santa Fe.
And we moved to Virginia. And then we lived in Virginia because my daughter was there, and we were there for 13 years. And then she moved to Florida. My husband didn't like the snow in Virginia and the cold because he's a native La Jollan. His father was our family physician in La Jolla, so I knew his father before I knew him. But that's another story. Anyway, so we moved down to be near my children here in Florida. So I have my son and his wife and my daughter and her family here. And our horses, we rescued 12 thoroughbred horses in Virginia. We brought 2 of them with us because they told us we had to. So we did. I used to race in California. I raised and raced thoroughbreds in California. I raced at Santa Anita, Hollywood Park, Del Mar, and Golden Gate. And I won at all those places. But when I found out what people were doing to their horses, I told my trainer, no more. I said, I can't race. My horses run because they want to. And this is the only country in the world that races 2-year-olds. None of my horses raced as 2-year-olds. They raced as 4, 5, 6-year-olds, actually 3.5, 4. Yeah. And because they were ready mentally and physically. One horse, Risky Ronnie, didn't race until he was 4.5 because physically he was okay, but mentally he was very immature and I didn't want him to get hurt. And then what does he do? He went up to Golden Gate and won. So, but we've been rescuing them. We've rescued 12 and these 2 came with me and then they said, well, you write books. It's our turn to write a book. So I had to translate what they told me.
What they told you. And what's the name of that book?
That's Horse Tails, Tales, but there's a picture of the horses with their tails on the cover. Horse Tails, Teddy and Justin Come to an Understanding. That's the total title. Horse Tails, Tales, Teddy and Justin Come to an Understanding. and there are pictures that Steele, my husband, took that are in the book. Excellent. You know, so you can see them having the conversation and then I say what they're telling each other.
So now you and your husband and your horses are all living in Florida. You're such a globetrotter. Amazing.
Yes. Yeah.
So how did that come about? How did Florida come about?
I told you my daughter moved here.
Oh,
And we
I
were in
thought that was
Virginia.
Virginia.
We moved from Virginia. My
From
daughter
Virginia.
moved from
Oh,
Virginia down to Florida, and my husband said, "Oh, we should go down there too," because he didn't like the cold weather. So we
sorry.
came down here, and we had to buy a house with a barn because two of the horses said they had to come with us. So we have the barn, we have the horses, we have the dogs, we have the cat.
Do you go back and forth to Virginia because your daughter is still up there, right?
No, she came down here. That's why we moved here. She moved here and said, you should come down too. So we moved here too. So she moved first and then we did.
Between the horses coming and the kids, I'm all confused as to who all
I'm sorry.
left Virginia.
Yeah, my son was in California, but he and his wife moved here when the rest of us had moved here. So now my daughter and her family are here. My son and his wife are here. His daughter is getting, she's applying to colleges for her law degree. She's in Colorado right now. Yeah. And I'm very proud of her. And so basically we're here. I miss California.
So, your longest stint in a state was in California then?
Yes, yes. Yeah, and I'm wearing the you have the owl because I was president of the National League of American Penwomen La Jolla branch.
Yes.
And they still consider me a member, which is great. And then I became president of the DC branch of the La Jolla. When we were in Virginia, I became president of the DC branch of the National League of American Penwomen. And then I moved down here, and I don't want to be a president again. I've got enough work to do. So I'm still a member of the National League of American Penwomen. So I wore that in honor of that.
Excellent. Now, besides the illustrating that you're working on, are there any other books in the works books of your own?
The book I just finished last year is all about Miami, because my grandfather, who, believe it or not, ended up in La Jolla, but my grandfather went down in 1904 to this place called Miami, and he said he saw there was paradise down there, but it hadn't developed yet. And so he went back every year, and finally in 1911, he actually drove his family down. And when you consider what it looked like in 1911, going through the Everglades and everything, unbelievable. He drove his family down to Miami, and then everybody thought he was crazy because he dredged and created these islands in Biscayne Bay, and people thought he was nuts, except that it became Millionaire's Row. Everybody wanted to live on these islands. Wow. And he created Palm Island, Hibiscus Island, Point View, and then he worked with Flagler on the Tamiami Trail, connecting Miami and Tampa. He worked with Mr. Collins on Miami Beach. I didn't know any of that until I researched, and nobody's written about him, even though the Historic Society of Miami knows about him. Nobody's written a book about him. Well, he was my grandfather, even though I never met him. Mm-hmm. And so I wrote the book about him, and it's called Miami's Yesteryears, The Forgotten Founder, Loch Tiffin Hyliman. And that was his name, Loch Tiffin Hyliman. He ended up in La Jolla. And what's really strange is he ended up in the same block that we lived in it's like an oval of houses on South Coast Boulevard in La Jolla. We were at one end and he was at the other end. And we didn't know it until my mother went to the bookstore to ask for a book. And when they heard her last name, they said, "Oh, are you Yvonne?" And she said, "Oh my God, don't tell me." Sure enough, he was there with his second wife, right in the same block.
Oh my God.
But he had disowned my father because my father sided with his mother when they were divorced. Oh. And so he didn't want my father to have anything to do with him. So I never met him. But he was there with his second wife, and he passed away in La Jolla, and so did she.
Very interesting. And so then you published that book, or has it not been published yet?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Legacy Press.
Okay.
Legacy Press. They are the publishers. They're a Florida publisher here. And I wanted a Florida publisher, and they wanted to publish it. And I said, good. So they published it last year.
Excellent.
And so they have the book, and it's for sale. And you can get it from my website, or you can get it directly from Legacy Press.
Very good. Very good.
That's the latest book. That's the 10th book, my 10th book.
I mean, I only have 5 so far.
Okay. All right.
My project for this year, because I mean, you know, being an independent, I've set my goal at publishing 1 title a year. And so what I'm working on this year is a translation of the first book in my Fairy Legacy series. The book was called Fairy Sight, so I'm working on the translation of that, and I've been having a grand old time revisiting that story, falling in love all over again with those characters, except for now they all speak Spanish. It's so exciting. So let me ask you this. Prior to the pandemic and all throughout, or before this whole thing changed our lives, were you participating in events, in conferences and things like that, in-person events?
Oh yes, I love doing that. And I don't charge anything. I just want permission to sell my books. So when I give a presentation, I just want to be able to sell my books after the presentation. So yes, I did several events. I love doing that.
And so were you able to shift over into a virtual world, or did you?
I had to. Yes, I've been on 4 Zoom presentations.
Nice. Very good.
So it's quite different, and you know, I prefer looking at the people in person and having the feeling. It's like being an actress on a stage. You know, when you have the people in front of you, you can get the feeling. It comes back to the stage. I used to do that too. I did some acting back in the day, and you know, I like being with real people. So the Zoom thing, you sort of get it because they look at you and you get a feeling for what their looks mean, but you don't, I don't know, it's not quite the same. So I'm looking forward to the real thing.
Yeah. Now, are you doing any teaching anymore, or doing workshops, virtual workshops, or anything like that?
No, not at this point.
Okay.
I have, but not now. I haven't recently, no. You know, when you were saying doing a book a year, that book about my mother's life in Paris took 14 years to write. So there was no way I could do a book a year. 14 years of research and reading all of everything, and you know, and then the book about my great uncle took 3 years because I had to go. His letters to my grandmother, who was his sister, his letters are at Georgetown University archives, and try reading the writing from that period of time.
Yeah.
I took my daughter with me to help me decipher what sometimes in the letters, what I put into the book, I had to put a line across because we couldn't quite figure out what the word was.
Yeah.
But that took a lot of work just to read and research.
Mm-hmm. I can imagine. Well, and I mean, my books involve research, even though they're fiction, they involve research because I usually try to place my characters in real locations. And for instance, in Fairy Sight is a book that takes place in the late 1800s. So I remember that I was doing a lot of research as to men's and women's fashions at the time, because I wanted my characters to dress accordingly. I remember spending hours researching whether, you know, like, was electricity widely available or no? Was there a telephone or no? I mean, did they have a crank? I mean, all these things that when you start writing, you're thinking, did they have a car or not? Was it all horseback in 1830, whatever, you know what I mean?
Yes,
Did
yes.
people have, ride horseback? Or so there's a little bit of research, not anything remotely what's involved in a historical fiction novel or a historical novel.
No, but a lot of research, and maybe what you found out, the fact that they had to ride horseback to get somewhere, they were closer to nature, and that's something we need to learn. That's part of this pandemic. If we could just go outside and enjoy nature, we have time to do it. Don't stay locked up. Go outside. Nature can talk to you. Trees talk to each other. Did you know that? Trees actually communicate.
That was one of the things that I researched and that I was so excited about, that
Yeah.
certain trees like aspens, that they're connected, their root systems are connected, and they crop up in different areas miles away. And so this is a book about fairies, but they communicate that way. I mean, like they can hear in the trees a message that's being sent from miles away, because the trees will relay the information, and these fairies can hear that. And when I found that, I was like, because fairies are guardians of a forest, you know what I mean?
Yes.
And so of course they would know that, they would understand the language of every creature in the forest, even the trees. And so it was such a magical discovery the day that I found out about the root systems. And then, of course, I used to live in Utah, and I remember we went to, oh my gosh, I'm spacing out the name of that park up there. It's not Zion, but it's the other Yellowstone. No, not Yellowstone. Anyways, we went up to this park, and on the way up to the entrance, we're seeing all these trees that are just dying. And when we got up there, we were asking the park personnel, and they said that they catch kind of like a not a virus, but a bacteria or something that starts killing them off. And because all their root systems are connected, then they all get, the same disease.
It passes.
And I just, anyway,
Well, we have one tree out here that's about 75 years old, and he's got his roots starting to wrap around the base. Yeah. And I asked an expert on this, and he said, yeah, sometimes they get mixed up, and and we have to cut those roots off, and I said, well, you're not going to kill the tree. No, we're going to save the tree, because these roots came up and then they started wrapping, and they could just suffocate the tree. They could kill the tree. And I'd never heard of that before.
Oh, goodness. Well, I think that we are we need to wrap up. I think this is about all the time that we have.
Oh, but, it's been so much fun.
Yes. Before we sign off, though, I wanted you to tell us, besides Waterbury Press, where people can get a hold of you. I don't know if you have a website or if you're on social media, or where would
LiteraryLady.com, www.literarylady.com, LITERARYLADY, literarylady.com, because I'm supposed to be the literary lady.
And you certainly are an epic literary lady. Good grief. I am so impressed with all your experiences.
Well, no, it just keeps me out of trouble.
It's wonderful. You really are an inspiration. I've enjoyed speaking with you so much. And I just want to say again, thank you so much for sharing your time with me, sharing your work with me. And I'm looking forward to having you here again. Maybe we'll do a creative writing workshop session.
I'd love that. No, I would. I'd love that. That's my favorite thing to do, is to inspire
Excellent.
writing.
Okay, well, I'm gonna think of something, and we'll put together a workshop. and do a little creative writing session.
Okay.
Anyways, well, I thank everyone for tuning in. Thank you, Patricia, for sharing your time with us.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.